Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment. We're here to talk about the next game in the Shining game series that I have access to. It's like number 16 or 15 or something like that. Anyway, we're talking about Shining Force EXA. This is by the same guys who made Shining Force Neo. It is like a vast improvement in every possible way, so good job. And then I found like an undubbed version, which is where instead of having like the awful American dubbing, we get the excellent, super excellent Japanese dubbing. And then we just can just read the English. So vast improvements there. The gameplay is it's exactly the way I had before. It's like a Diablo-esque kind of PlayStation 2 game where you have yourself and a companion or two. Only it's a little more streamlined and smooth. So we have two main characters. One can use bows and magic, and the other one can use two-handed sword and one-handed sword, right? So it's essentially the same moveset that the Protag-kun from the first game had. I want to say Max. What's it, Max? I think it was Max. Or is Max the guy? Yeah, I think it's Max. Anyway, but it's split up between two characters, and so one stays back at the base, which you'll get pretty quickly, and does base defense when randomly you get attacked and whatnot, with like whoever's hanging out with them back there, and then the other one kind of goes forward. And it's interesting because normally when you have this kind of stuff, like both of the characters have they'll be like a joint, or they're like twinsies, or they'll have like a dual purpose, but like pretty quickly, one of the characters is like, hey, you're the boss, and this other character is like, you're not the boss, but you can still be like one of the main characters that gets chosen, which kind of struck me as a little bit odd. Just, I played enough of these games where it's like, that's different. Like, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. It was just like, normally you'd have they would the secret MacGuffin that gives them like all the power or access to stuff is split between the two. But this is like, nope, that guy's got it, she does not. Yep. And so it's a male and female character. And let's see, dun, dun, dun. And the other thing I'm going to try, or the one thing I'm going to try that's a little different this time, because sometimes my videos, if you watch the video and listen to the stuff, like there's like almost no relation to the two. I just show like gameplay footage in the background of like the game I'm playing while I talk about it. So it's almost more of a podcast. And if you watch, you're not getting too much. Sometimes like the Black Ops stuff, I spend a little bit more time. But I don't have a lot of time for editing, and I'm not very good at it. And so if I ever end up making money on this stuff, which I highly doubt I will get an editor to help me out with this. But for now, the one thing I'm going to try is that I'm going to try to match up the stuff on the screen with what I'm talking about. So we'll see if that pans out. I'm pretty much instead of just like recording audio whenever I get around to it, I'm going to like break the audio up to like the portion of the game that I was playing it in, so that when I can have like the audio at least like be in the same section of the game and not just like totally forward or backwards from like what's going on. So see how that works out for me. Okay, so anyway, and I apologize if you hear like crazy noises in the background. I'm like on the street waiting for my car to get fixed. And so these cars like are driving by, but they're like very loud, which is kind of odd. Maybe if I move away from them a little bit. I don't know if it's something to do with like the fences over here or whatnot. It just seems like, I was like, God, the car sounds are so loud. Anyway, okay, so Shining Force EXA, it starts off, and the opening cinematic, which is much like the previous game, where it's just a bunch of like cinematics from throughout the game, just kind of like slammed together, kind of with some really baller like anime rock music. So that was cool, and it's a bunch of awesome scenes of people just like fighting and stuff. And I was from the beginning, I was like, awesome, this game's gonna be so much better than the other one, and it kind of is. And so then the game starts off, and we get this like creepy looking dude, and he's like crawling through the grass, being sneaky and whatnot. At that point, he pops out. He's like, and he pulls out a sword and then tosses a rock into some bushes. And the one thing to note is, so the other game was like very like just the 3D characters of like the PlayStation 2 era, like kind of shoddy 3D models as well. More of like a PlayStation 1 era looking stuff. And these are like more cell shaded. Now I want to say they're like fully cell shaded, but they definitely look more of that cell shaded animation. Anyway, so back to the character. So he tosses the rock into the bushes, nothing happened. He picks up a bigger rock, tosses it, and this time like a pig monster hops out, and he kills it. And then it was at that point that I recognized that I'm playing the undubbed version, because it was a Japanese audio voice acting, and I was like, oh, this is so much better. This is like 1,000 times better. And then we find out that this is apparently, he's like, yay, my dinner, I'm ready for this. And at that point, Gadford, who's a centaur guy, walks up and calls the guy Toma. So Toma is one of the main characters here. And he's like, Toma, your sword fighting has improved drastically. And then Toma's like, oh, thank you. It's all because of your training and whatnot. And then Toma, he's like super shonen anime protagonist, confidence and arrogance, to be completely honest. So that gets pointed out by the characters, and we just get him kind of getting some of that stuff. And then with Gadford is Maybelle, who is an elf, and she's an elf archer, and she's super excited for fresh meat. Yes, exactly. And apparently, Toma makes fun of her for having like an endless appetite despite being an elf, and she's like, "Oh, for elves, I don't even eat that much." And he's like, "What? How do elves eat so much?" And we don't really get the we don't exactly get an explanation for that. It's just that's how it is. At that point, we find out that Gadford and Maybelle were out gathering fruits and vegetables. And with that little intro done, we start the game. So we get a title, Chapter 1, Holy Sword, Shining Force. Yes, immediately. So at this juncture, we head over to Yale Village. And then the people here are all, there's a bunch of like mercenaries and adventurers and stuff in this town. And they're all here because of the rumors of the Holy Sword being near here. And at first, I thought it was two different things. I thought it was Holy Sword, like, comma, Shining Force, but it is Holy Sword, Shining Force. So the name of the Holy Sword is Shining Force. Okay, so that's what it is in this game. Got it. After talking to them and meeting these kind of like sketchy like rat people, like one of them is like a merchant who identifies stuff for us. He's like the Tristan of this game. Calling back to like Diablo, and then he's got like 2 kids, and every time you talk to them, they're like very friendly and very nice, and then you get their thoughts, and their thoughts are always about being like scheming merchants and trying to get more money out of people and take advantage of the situation to make more money. And then the kids like talking to each other about like being scheming, and like there's like a girl rat, and she keeps going to Toma and being like, "You like me, right? We're friends, right? We're like, ooh, you like me," and you can be like, "Yes," and in her head she's like, "Yes, good, I got him just where I want him." It's pretty excellent, not gonna lie. And the voice acting is superb. We find Maybelle prepping the food for cooking, and she makes some side comment about, or she makes some commentary about like, "Oh, I'm out of herbs. I need herbs. The herbs are up on the hill." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, I've played this. I played action. I played JRPGs enough. I know that I am the one who needs to head up that hill and find these herbs." So, something happened. There it is. I switched to a different notes. Anyway, so dun dun dun. Toma then complains to whoever listens to him. Oh, he complains to the rat guy. What is this guy's name? The rat people or something, born as kids, maybe. I don't know. I can't remember his name. Anyway, complains to him about taking so long to find the Shining Force, something about them being here for months and not having any success or whatever. And at this point, I go out and I fight a couple bad guys that are just like wandering around in this like little area, and I'm like, all right, time to get these cheats going. I don't have time to like sit around with this game, and that was super hard. So I downloaded a while ago. I think back with Shining Tears, like a huge batch of PCSX2 codes, because you have to get the codes from like Action Replay or Game Genie and then convert them to like a raw file and put them into a PNAC form, which is, it's all fine and dandy, but then it's like, why should I do what someone else has already done? And someone did like hundreds of these games, or collected them and just has them in like, had them in a big like GitHub document. So I got all those, but this game was not a part of that. So then I had to do some searching around, and I found like the codes broken down into the RAR form, and then I had to create a PNAC file and get it in here. So anyway, so if that's something you want to do, it doesn't really exist. You have to make it yourself. It took me maybe like 5-10 minutes to get it all figured out. So really not that complicated, because again, I'm not a smart guy. So if I can figure it out, you definitely can. All right. So then we head up to the top of the hill, we grab some herbs, we head back, and as soon as we grab the herbs, it's like nighttime. So the pig is looking super delicious, rotisserie over this fire. Gadford and Maybelle are sitting around there with Toma, and they're all just talking about how they've been looking for the Holy Sword for months. Toma really wants to get it so he can be king. Gadford wants to get it so he can be a worthy knight. And Maybelle wonders if anyone can be a king, if it's got to be like a certain person, or if she can do it too. And then Gadford tells her that the promise from the Emperor, I think it's like Nosworth or whatever, not the Emperor, the Empire, is that anyone who gets the Holy Sword will be crowned like the new king or whatever. And then the food kind of wraps up, and Maybelle's about to serve it, and Toma mentions that, quote unquote, she is missing. And it's, oh, who's she? All right, so then we head back. We got to go find her so we can all eat together. So we head back up the hill, and this is where Toma finds Cyril. And Cyril is just like staring off at the moon, thinking about stuff. They talk. She mentions, like, I don't have any friends. And he's like, you got friends like me and so and so and so. And she's like, eh. And he's like, you seem really alone. And then this like cute little white dragon thing pops up named Zira. And it's like, what about me? And then Cyril's like, oh, we're not friends. We're just tied by destiny. No further explanation given. Toma's like, well, hurry up. We're all hungry and we're going to eat. And then he leaves. And then Cyril, who is kind of a babe, no lie, her and Zira talk about some cryptic shit about the party being strong and how they've like tried to like avoid things, and how like, are they going to, is she going to tell them about the thing? And she's like, no, they can't find out, something. And it's like, okie dokie. And that they need to be careful. Then we fade to black, and it's the next day. So then everyone talks about how they're going to expand the search, which is something that Gadford and Toma had spoken of the night before. And then Cyril's like, I don't want to do that. Let's just stay here. And he's like, no, we've been doing this for months. We decided we're going to expand. And Cyril's like, okay, well, I'm going to stay here. And he's like, all right, well, if you change your mind, we'll be up ahead. And then Gadford and Maybell talk more about how, like, even though they all met here on their quest to get the Holy Sword, that they become they become friends and they enjoy each other's company. And Maybell's like, I hope we can stay friends even after we find the sword or after this whole adventure goes through. So at this juncture, we leave Cyril and go to catch up with Gadford and Maybell, who have already left. And as we're leaving, she nods. And then we play through like a little short tutorial level. And the game's like, this is how this works. This is how you do this. This is your abilities. This is you can do charge attack. Excuse me. You can do charge attacks in this game, which is new. Unless I just totally missed that the other time. Eventually, we catch up with our friends, and then the path splits 3 different ways. So, Gadfort mentions that we should all take the different paths. So Maybell and him like head off in different directions, leaving Toma to the third path. And as he goes along, he eventually gets to another part where there's 2 paths. And then Cyril's like, hey, wait up. And he's like, oh, hey, cool. You decided to come along and hang out. And she's like, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, oh, we're splitting up to do this, this, and that. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go this way. And he's like, well, you want to talk about it first? She's like, no, go that way. I'll go this way. And he's like, all right, Jesus Christ. So he heads off in that direction after Toma sasses her a little bit, and she dismisses him. And then we take over as her, and then we get like a little tutorial about her. And she uses magic, and she can also get bows or crossbows and use them. And then after we move around for a bit, Zero speaks up and is like, hey, Cyril, so what are we going to do now? Right before we got to this cave. And she's like, well, we're going to do what we always do. We're just going to go back and say we didn't find anything. And then Zero's like, you're not... I can't believe you're able to fool everyone for this long. Like, you're not going to be able to keep it up forever. And then Cyril gets a little upset. And at that juncture, Toma, Gadford, and Maybell, like, roll on up. And they're like, hey, what's in this cave? And she's like, I already checked. Nothing's in there. And then Gadford's like, well, I think we should all check it together. Because you never know. Like, one person might miss something. Someone else might see it. And she's like, I don't like that. And so then they all run inside. And she's like, fuck. She's like, well, I'm just going to wait out here. So we head out and we run right into, what do they call them? Monster gates? They call them in this game, they just call them like monster balls or something. Anyway, so we keep pushing forward through this dungeon. Eventually we find a mural, and this is where we get some backstory. So apparently the Shining Force was crafted or exists because there was like an evil god, Malaxtra, who had an aerial fortress named Gusk. While we're getting this kind of like story told to us by Maybell, she recalls that there's a legend. When the world was in ruin, the hero got the holy sword and rose up. During the final battle, they both perished. And then what's his fuck? Gadfort mentions that it must be universal. If the elves have it and we have it, and then the Magus have the same story, it's like this universal story, so it must be true because there's all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And then we keep moving around. Eventually, we find this like crazy looking round room. In the middle is the Holy Sword, the Shining Force. Awesome. So then the 3 of them decide, like, all right, let's do some coin tosses and see who gets to go for the sword first. So Maybell wins. She goes up. She wishes the sword to save her dying people. And that's the last we hear about her dying people. Just saying. The elves, like, really don't come up again. So she goes for it. Can't pull it out. Next is Gadfort. He wants to remain an honorable and true knight. And he goes for it, and it's no go. So I guess he's got to be dishonorable now. It's like, fucking dude, just make a choice. Anyway, so finally Toma goes. And right before he's about to try, Cyril runs up and shouts for him to stop. And she says that once the sword is drawn, then the fate of the world will be set into motion, and does not explain any further. And he's like, whatever, I want to be king. And so he pulls the sword out. It's like, ta-da, I did it. And so then the whole mountain shakes and breaks apart, revealing this like giant kind of like, at first I thought it looked kind of Aztec, but now it's like a big fortress. Cyril is like super aghast. She's like, and then the fortress speaks directly to Toma, calling him master and beckoning him forward. And at that point, we go into Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Fortress of Magic. And the game does that. It'll be like these big climactic like story little bits, and then it'll be next chapter, and then like a story bit, and then just fight, and then a story in the next chapters. That's how the game works, which is not bad because it's you know what you're getting into, and you're not surprised, and it's just like, oh, there's a big story bit. It must be the end of the chapter, and moving on to the next chapter. All right, so we think it's more lore dump. And this is not from anybody particular. The game just like dumps at us, the player. And it's like, oh, there's two nations at war. There's the Emperor over here on the left of Noswald, and then there's the Magic Kingdom of Finland. if I wrote that right. Finland, and they're the Magus. They're kind of like the beast people or whatever. And so the two great leaders, there's the Lion King from Noswald, and who's Ragdanan, and then there's Rim Sense from Fridland. So at that point, the crew moves up to this very large, like, headquarters room is what I'm going to call it. 'Cause it's literally the fucking headquarters from, like, the previous game. And there's this, like, black-orange dog guy that comes rolling out, and he's like, I run the castle, my name is Zenas. And then Zenas is like, do you have any more questions? And it's like, yeah, I have a lot of fucking questions. And Toma is literally like, yes, I have nothing but questions. Like, the fuck? And I was like, what kind of bullshit? Anyway, good job, Toma. Anyway, then we find out the place is called the Geo Fortress. And the Shining Force then wraps itself around the Heritors. So then instead of having like a sword, Toma, which he fights with a sword, but instead of fighting with the Shining Force sword, he just has this like glove essentially on his arm so that he can never be separated, continue to be the master and whatnot. And then Toma's like, can I be the king? And he's like, the Geo Fortress is equivalent to 10,000 soldiers, so yes. But first it has to be fully restored. It's like, all right, how do we do that? And he's like, well, we got to start with the subsystems. So then Zenas asking Toma to follow. Oh, runs off and is like, Toma, follow me. And so what Toma does, he explains that there is a component that is buried nearby and that this teleporter thingy will take him to where it needs to go. So we head back out. Oh, we head out and break it open. There's a bunch of stones and shit around this thing. And then once we break it open, we break out all the stones and release it or whatever, we head back. And this unlocks the warp system and the art system. So art system is the one from before. It's like the force system, I think they called it. They might have called it the art system too. But it's where you, in this game, you don't just like level stuff up by grabbing like all the like pieces of like blue crystal or whatever, and then using mithril chunks or whatever. You still have to use mithril chunks, but now you find just like monoliths standing around. So when you hit a monolith, it'll be like, oh, you gain access to these skills, and then you can go back and power up. And then the warp system works exactly the same. There's these little like warp things, and they look exactly the same as the previous game, Shining Force, Neo. But I feel like it's nice because you can just like activate them immediately pretty much, and so you can go out and you can activate them, and then you can automatically come back here, and then you get the return crystal immediately as well. So it's like you can bounce. It's a really Diablo, right? It's like, oh, you have an unlimited town return to town scroll, and then you have these like waypoints, and so you can just like bounce around, right? Unlike Diablo, if you die, you don't just go back to town and have to like wander your way back over to pick up your gear. If you die, you like die for good, which happened once, and then I learned my valuable lesson. Let's see. We head out, break it open, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then so we can upgrade our arts, we can upgrade the ship, but to upgrade the ship, to like kind of unlock more of it, we need red metal. And so we can take the warp gate to this new town, and then from there we're going to head to some ancient ruins. So it's like, all right, onward. Also, at this juncture, we can choose who we control. So we can control Toma or Cyril. And whoever stays behind does not just stay behind and do nothing. They stay behind and get busy. Because periodically, while you're just wandering around the monster-infested world, like doing your Diablo stuff, the Geo Fortress will be attacked by different things. And then so whoever's back there has to use them and like whoever their two teammates are, up to two teammates, to defend the place. And then you can get some robots to help too. You can spend a lot of money and do all that stuff. So I'm choosing Cyril, obviously, because she's hot. And also because she has this ability, she has spells, right? Toma just has like swords and shit, but she can use bows and spells. And if she just had bows, I'd use that, but the spells are so much better. Because like, for example, there's a spell called just like ice, I think, and it's a nice shield, and it stays on you for a bit, and it just like massacres everyone around it. And then you can also get a skill called Inferno, which it pretty much does the same thing, but it's fire. It kind of creates like in Diablo, like when you get that, what's that spell called? It's not Firewall, but it's Fire Run, or maybe it is called Inferno. They just ripped it off. But you cast it, and then when you run, there's fire behind you. So it does that, but the range of fire behind you is like absolutely minuscule. Like it's barely more than like just the ice shield floating around. So anyway, all right, time to, let's see, town is, oh yeah, so we go to the town. It's got something about like a sword thing. I'm like, whatever. And then we head out. There's a monolith, gives us more access to arts. Okay, outside there, we start looking for the ancient arena. So apparently there are a bunch of them all over the world. So the ancient arenas are like the legion nests. So this first ancient arena is where we're going to get red metal. But after this, unless it's like a story point, you don't get metal from these things. Well, you get core metal, and core metal is how you upgrade the Geo Fortress. But to unlock things, you have to get certain metals, like red metal, blue metal, and silver metal. There might be more, but that's what I'm remembering right now. Okay, it'll come up once I get there. Anyway. Yeah, but this is where we get this is where we get the warning about the attacks on the fortress, and then we kind of get the tutorial for that. We head back to Toma. he runs out with his crew, beat up that. Let's see. Okay, so then as soon as you beat those little like defense missions, you head back to like wherever you were at before, and so Cyril goes and she finds like the Legion Hive. What do they don't call it Legion Hive? What do they call in this game? Anyway, but they bunch of what are they? Oh, the arenas. So we find the arena for like the boars, and then we go in there and kick the shit out of the boars. Oh wait, before we do that, we head out to beat the boss, and then Bunny shows up with us, some kids. They come in. Oh yeah. Okay, so then we get this kind of like, at some point, I don't know why I didn't write this down. At some point, we got a little cutscene when there's like these kids wandering around chatting with each other. We find out later they're Magus kids, and obviously they're going to join our party. And they do their thing, and then they talk about boars, and they find like a big boar, and it like chases them, and it chases them right into the fortress. So after the defense mission, Amy and Falkland are in the fortress. So anyway, at that point, we go back to Cyril. She gets to the ancient arena. Okay, yeah, so we defeat the boar. Cool, we get the red medal. Then we head back to Lacton, which is that little quaint town or whatever, and we find out as soon as we walk in that it's been invaded. Oh no, who invaded it? This asshole named Philip. And he's the leader of the Noswald soldiers in this area, and so we have to intervene to save the village. And once we show up, kill the monsters, Philip like really flips the fuck out. And then Cyril and Philip start fighting, and he summons a big old monster to beat his ass. Toma and Maybell then come to see what's going on, so they come out of the fortress too. And then Cyril's talking about how much of a shit face Philip is and how he's an asshole. And then Gadford walks up and he starts talking shit on him too, because apparently they know each other, because Gadford was a member of like the Noswald army, and so is Philip. And then let's see. Oh, then Philip runs off like a little bitch he is, and we all head back to the castle. Then we switch perspective over to this airship, and then Ragnadan, who's the emperor of the Noswald Empire, he's like standing there. He's getting a report from its sister, it seems, and he wants to verify it. So his sister Cathenia is like, "Oh, brother, what's wrong?" And he's like, "I received a report from Philip about a boy having, a boy having a sword, the Shining Force." And she says, "Oh no, it's too early for it to come forth." And he's like, "This might actually be a good thing. It's been 3,000 years, so it's time to get back the power of the Empire," or some bullshit. And then she's like, "What about your health, brother?" And he's like, "Don't worry about my health. I'm doing great." He says that he will be fine, and then he sends out an expeditionary force to track down the Geo Fortress, essentially, and find out what's going on with all that. And at that point, it goes dun-dun-dun, Chapter 3, New Allies. So then we go back to a scene of the two kids, Amy and Falkland, and apparently they're just looking for the Shining Force. And then, this is where we get that scene of them, like, running around, they run into a boar, Amy zaps it, and then brags, and then the ground shakes, and then we switch over to the Geo Fortress, and there we get, like, Toma waking up. At this point, after getting the controls back in, I decided, all right, cool, that was fun, time to cheat. So I cheat, max out everything. We then get the gyro terminal. This lets us communicate back with Xenos whenever we want. And then, let's see. So we got black metal. That was another one. Black metal, blue metal, silver metal. So now we got to go get black metal, and it's to the west of Yale, which is the town we started in. So we travel over there. And then we switch in Falkland and at that point we switch over to Falkland, who is chasing Ami while they're both being chased by boars, and then the Geo Fortress comes under attack. And during this battle, I totally fucked up earlier, I apologize. So while the Toma's defending the Geo Fortress at this point, this is when Falkland and Ami come running in. And then at that point, Xenos also calls out to Cyril and is like, "Hey, Toma, you need to come back. Toma needs to talk to you about something." So we return right back to the Geo Fortress. Cyril gets caught up on Amy and Falkland and all that stuff, and we get introduced to them. Amy is like a fiery, loud person who thinks she's the best and all this stuff. Falkland's quiet and shy and whatnot. And they talk about Lavace, and they wanted to come here to get the Shining Force so they could become Lavace, which are like the best Magnuses in the world. Toma questions this a little bit, and then Cyril mentions that, when Toma questions it, that's when Cyril reveals to us that being a Lavace is like being a chief Magus, and that these kids are part of the Magnus Empire, and looking for Shining Force, yep. And then it's like, too late, Toma's got it, and they're like, well, we can't be Lavace, but at least we can hang out here and do some cool stuff. And then we talk about killing and eating pigs, like, you kill pigs and eat them? Wow, they're so strong, blah, 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 blah. They want to prove to us that they can get big and strong too, so they join the party at this time. And then back to getting black metal. So we go and hit Yi Il Village to open up the warp gate over there. We then head past into the woods, fighting some big boars and whatnot. At that point, Cyril wants to... I'm playing as Cyril. We've run into this big board. She wants to wake it up, but Ami and Falkland, who are with me, they're like, I don't know, it chased us earlier. It was so mean and blah, 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 blah. And we're like, whatever, YOLO. So we beat it. It's a tough super boss, but we kick the shit out of it. Eventually, we get to the boar's cave, and here we kill a whole bunch of boars, and inside we get the black metal. Hooray. This takes us back to the Geo Fortress, and we can finally recover the cannon. After activating it, Zenos says that it will take some time to be fully ready, so we got to go do some other bullshit. Toma then turns to Ami and Falkland, and they're like, hey, we're going to stay, and they officially join the party at this juncture. We then get a little cutscene where there's like this fire palace, and this is the home of the Magus, who's led by Riem Sian. She's the head of the Furtland nation, and then Rag Nadan is head of the Naswal Empire, and they're the ones who are kind of like at war with each other. Anyway, we get all of these scenes going back and forth between the two of them, like doing shenanigans before they eventually fall in love. And that's not a joke. Anyway, so Ramsian, she's speaking to her assistant, who looks like a real bad guy, and like the whole time I'm like, is she going to be an actual bad guy who works for like Shatra or Malshatra? Yeah, I think that's right. But no, she just looks like super evil, like an evil demon. Her name is Lerna Izel. They're talking about Toma. They're moving around the castle. They talk about the resurrection and how they talk about how the humans, the Naswal Empire, started their invasion 10 years ago and how that's causing a lot of problems and that they need to make sure they go talk to the Heriter. This ends chapter 3, taking us into chapter 4, called Rulers of the World. And so we go back over to the Naswal airship. Ragnadam is talking to himself, because he's a crazy person, about bringing out the power of the Shining Force. And then we head over to the Geo Fortress. We see a huge army poised to attack the Geo Fortress. And Zenos is talking about how we can use the cannon, how it's only a long-range attack, so we can't use it in like our little defensive battles, but we can go out and use it offensively. Toma is super excited about it, and then an alarm goes off. And it's that fucking Philip guy again. Fuck that guy. So we have to head out to their headquarters at the Narda checkpoint, which is north of Yale Village. We kill. Once we get to that checkpoint, Philip's like, you have fallen for my trap. You left the Geo Fortress, and now they're in trouble. And little did this motherfucker realize that because that Toma's just hanging out there massacring dudes the whole time. So he messes them up real bad. They have these like dragon beasts, and they summon some other beasts. They're all like technological based creatures. So the Magus are like demon-looking creatures, so it's okay to kill them. And then the humans, so we're not just killing humans, because apparently that's a no-no, because we're playing by like Nintendo 1980 standards. But so the humans, we don't ever fight the humans. We just fight like technological beasts that they're created. They're called like, I don't know, there's like a whole sub-story about that later on. Anyways, we kill all them back at the base, and then Cyril's like, fuck you, Philip, we're going to take you down. And then he taunts us, and then he sends wave after wave at us of monsters, and that he's never going to give up trying to destroy us, and then he runs away. And then we find a sign warning us about fighting something, and I'm like, whatever, I'm cheating, who gives a fuck. So then I go in there, there's like this cave, and it's like, oh, be careful, there's Gayu, he's a mighty dragon, blah blah blah. And I'm like, YOLO. And I go in there and get one-shotted, and I was like, damn. Okay, good to know. Anyway, so we head through the cave, we finally get to the HQ, and then at some point we have to blast open some stuff using the cannon, which is finally finished charging, right? And we can use it to open up various areas throughout the game, and you could probably use it against bad guys. I never did, but because I was like doing fine without it. And then Toma wants to use it again and again and again, but he has to charge up, so we have to be judicious about it. And honestly, if you just kind of like hang out for a second, it'll recharge throughout the game. And then some areas you just can't use it until you unlock further things, so like that is what it is. Let's see. So we blast through that. Went blah blah blah. Okay. Then we switch back over to Ragadan. He's super pissed. He wants to meet the Heriter. And then we go back to Cyril, and she bumps into Philip and his army, and we beat the shit out of him. And then he summons Duga, who's this big werewolf guy, and then he flees. Not Duga. So once we deal with that, when we beat the shit out of Duga, he flees as well. And it's like, well, back to the Geo Fortress we go. So we head back. We discuss Philip, how he's leading an investigation unit and not a full war unit. And then also Gad Fort knows something about Duga. He's like, oh, Duga? I know Duga. That's interesting. I wonder why Duga would have been sent out. That doesn't make any sense. And then he talks about how noble and honorable Ragadan is and stuff. And then Ragadan's in our fortress, and he's like, aha, I'm here. And he's like, what? You're the Heriter? To Toma? It's like, how? Give me that Shining Force. And he's like, no, go fuck yourself. And then he orders that we serve him and the Nazgul Empire, and Toma's like, no. And then he rushes over, and Toma gets beat and is about to get his head cut off when Riem Sian shows up and blasts them apart. And she's like, oh, behold, I am the Chief Magus. And Amy and Falkland are like, oh, it's the Chief Magus, blah, 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 blah. And then the two leaders argue for a bit. They start fighting, and then Toma steps up and is like, stop it. And they agree that they can hate each other, but not kill each other yet. Okie dokie. Then Ragnadam teleports back to his airship, and that ends chapter 4. So then we head over to chapter 5. Toma's hanging out, questioning the Emperor. Again, Gadfort carries water. I love that. For Ragnadan. And he's like, every child of the Empire knows that the Empire and the Magus do not get along. How do you not know this? And then Toma starts giving like his tragic backstory, how he's just a wanderer and how his people are all dead, but they just meandered and they didn't really connect to any nation. And so Gadfort's like, all right, everybody, player playing this game, let me explain this. So both nations have been at odds for hundreds of years. There's this whole thing about Ragnadan being like the lion emperor, because lions are mythical creatures, and he's known for his ferocity, just like a lion. And then Cyril questions Toma on his plan to like unite the people and have them be calm and love each other and whatnot. And he's like, hell yeah, I'm going to strengthen the Geo Fortress, and then I'm going to calm the nation leaders down because I'm going to be the king, and it's going to be great. And then Gadfort brings up drugs again. Oh, no, sorry, drugs. Duga again. Fucking autocorrect. He's an old friend of Gadfort's, and he wants to rescue him because he believes he's under some sort of mind control or something's amiss, because there's no reason Duga would just attack them. That's not what he does. He's much more honorable than that and whatnot. And that also Philip's a piece of shit, and there's no way Duga would actually work for him. And so we need to hurry up, catch up with Philip's forces as they try to retreat back to the Empire capital so that we can rescue Duga. So at that point, Gadfort forces himself into our party so he can talk to Duga, and we head right back to the cave where we left off, which is nice because there's a teleportation, like a waystone right there, so we can just waystone back over there. We fight. We then head into a town. It's the town of Cantore. Yeah, it's from Cantore. It's where Chiquitita is from, and there's still like beast people living here, and it's like, oh great, it's the exact, they just took the map and brought it over here, and I'm like, I wonder how much they did that, and I'm just not noticing it, like how much of this game is just like the same maps over and over again. I'm like, I bet a lot. That's smart. I like that. Good for them. The genius. And hey, there's a chip. What the fuck? No relation to the game, absolutely at all, outside of this, and like there exists a Shining Force. No one mentions anything from the previous games. No Cult of the Moon or any of that shit. But here's Cantore Village and exists, and the leader is also named Yosef. Oh, it's like an alternative universe, I guess. Anyway, so we learn that the people of Cantore Village have been kidnapped. And then it's like, okay, cool, we're not going to deal with that right now. We'll deal with that later. So then we head over to Cantore Castle. Yep, that castle. Gadfort tells us, at this point, informs us that sometimes there's going to be invisible enemies and invisible generators, which is awesome. I love every second of that. I don't, but fuck. Anyway, we crush through the outskirts of the castle, and, well, we don't even go to the castle. We just hang out around the outskirts and kill, and then we find some green metal. And it's like, cool, great. And so Zenus is like, oh, you found green metal, come back. We can activate the radar system. And so, cool. So we head back, we activate the radar system, which is excellent because it shows us where like secret items are being hidden. It shows us where treasure chests are. It shows us where not enemies, but like the monster orbs are and stuff. So then we head back out and we get a little further ahead, and then Gadfort mentions that Duga's unit was on a hill nearby in these old ruins. So we head up there. There's Duga. Gadfort's like, Duga, what are you doing? Something. And then he's like, he's out of his mind. We must knock him out and take him back to the Geo Fortress. And Cyril's like, yeah, let's do this. So we do. And before we start our fight, Gadfort tells us to be careful because Duga's one of the top 3 warriors in all of Noswell. So after the fight, Gadfort again tries to talk to him out of his madness, and he is sort of successful, kind of. So then we bring back the Geo Fortress, we tie him up against a wall with chains. And Zeus is like, I have an idea. So he tells Toma that he can work on this thing. Toma tells him to do it. Okay. That he's got to like redo something with like the recovery unit inside the Geo Fortress and whatnot. And then we talk, Gadfort defends Duga, saying he's a great person, and he's going to do great for the Empire, or he's going to do great. We just got to help him. And then Toma talks shit on the Empire, like how could they do this to one of their people? How could they do this to Cantore Village? Blah, blah, blah. And then Gadfort defends the Empire, and he's like, this is not the Emperor. The Emperor doesn't know anything about this. This is all Philip. Philip's an asshole. And I don't think we ever run into Philip again after this point, unless you do maybe secret missions or side missions that I didn't involve myself with. Anyway, he does admit that the Emperor is an asshole, and that wraps up chapter 5. So heading into chapter 6, called Understanding Each Other, Zenus discovers that Duga is under mind control, which I could have sworn we'd already talked about several times, but he discovered it again, I guess. And he mentions that we can fix it by converting the repair function on the Geofortress, which again I feel like we already talked about. But so how do we do that? All right, so we got to go get some. And Toma's like, what? Do we got to get some metal to fix it? Ha ha ha. And Xenos is like, yes, blue metal. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So it's down in Ranbur's tomb. And Toma is super psyched to get the Geofortress even stronger. Cyril has like strong concerns, and she asks why he thinks that the Heritor needs so much power. Is it for protection? And he's like, hey, why are you so mad? And she's like, baka, and runs off. And then Maybelle's like, hey, she's acting weird. Maybe we should go talk to her. But first we switch over to Cyril and we head to the tomb. And we fight, get the blue metal. And then we go to pick up the blue metal. She's like, I don't agree with this. So Toma wants to get the blue metal. He can get it. And I was like, Jesus Christ. So then we teleport back to switch over to Toma. And then we teleport. And then we finally get the blue metal. And then we come back with it. And Cyril says that she's like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Toma, I just want to tell you some stuff. I need to talk to you alone before you use the blue metal. And then Maybelle sees us talking about this stuff and sneaks off and listens to our conversation. So then Cyril and Toma start talking about the fortress, how they need so much power. And Toma's like, oh, that needs a lot of power so I can be the king and I can keep peace and do all this stuff. And then she's like, that's not right. The reason why you need so much power is because the whole point of the Geofortress and the Heritors is to fight an enemy that can destroy the world. And this is where we get introduced again to Mal Shatra, who we saw in like the memorial at the beginning that I mentioned a couple times. And the thing is, he wasn't killed all the way back in the day. No, he was just put to sleep. He is sleeping. And that the whole role of the Heritor is to stop him, not to be the king. And Toma's like, that's fine. I don't mind saving the world. That sounds great. Because the only reason I wanted to become a king was to stop the war in the first place, because he's an shonen anime pro tag, and that's always what they want. He then asks her what the rest of her story is, and she's like, "Oh, I'll tell you later. Don't worry about it." And it's like, "Okay, cool." And so he's like, "I'm gonna go help with the Duga situation." So he heads out to that, and after he leaves, Zira, the little friend that tags along with Cyril, speaks up. And she's like, I'm really surprised. He's like a super good guy. And Cyril's like, yes, I'm also surprised. And then Zira's like, hey, maybe you should apologize. And she's like, I cannot. I have been mean for too long. He would never forgive me. And it's very dramatic, whatever. And at that point, Maybelle, who has been like spying on them the whole time, walks up and she's like, hey, I heard everything. Listen, we're your friends. He's your friend. I'm your friend. We're all friends. We're here and available for you. Also, Toma is such an anime show. He's such a shonen anime pro tag that he will definitely 100% forgive you. You just have to ask. And he cares for you. Wink, wink. And she's like, I don't understand your winking. And she's like, you will later. Wink, wink. Back over to Toma and Zenas, they are speaking about Duga. He's like, hey, it'll take some time for the device to be constructed, and you should go rest. So then Toma's like, all right, I'm going to take a nappy-potamus. So he runs over to his room and runs into Maybelle. And she's like, hey, Cyril's out on her balcony, and you should go talk to her. So he does. And she apologizes, and they both get embarrassed because they both like each other, and they're both kind of like, it's very like shonen anime, like, oh, blushing, looking away, kind of stuff. And then finally she's like, I can't take this anymore, and like runs off. Baka! Real tsundere. Anyway, that leads to the end of chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7, which is Warrior's Return. So we start off with the Magus again. Lerna Zal is reporting in about Noswald, about their War Beast, War Beast, that's what they call them, War Beast production increasing dramatically. Riem Sian is confused, just like, why? What are they doing? I don't understand. Something about possessing and then she mentions something about being able to possess the eyes and ears of all Magus, which includes Amy and Falkland. And so then she does something, and we head over to the Geofortress. And at this point, Zenas has successfully cured Duga, and Gadford is pumped. He then fills Duga on everything that's been going on, and immediately Ami is like, oh, I love that beefy, handsome wolf man. I bet his dick is huge. I'm so excited. And Falkland's like, and Duga's like, Philip definitely mind-controlled me. And then he mentions that the whole reason he was down there in the first place was because Philip was doing some shady shit with the Cantori village and the miners, so that he went down to kind of like check it out and make sure things were taken care of. And he's like, hey, I need to go beat up Philip. So I went down there. Philip apologized. He offered me a meal as like a peace thing, but it must have been poisoned. And you know what? It's time for revenge. So Toma's like, I am down. Let's go do this. So then Duga gets forced into our party for this portion. And I grab Ami because why not? Sure. Toma's badmouths Ragadan again, but both Gadford and Duga defend the Emperor. And at this point, we head over to the mines in the north of Cantori. All right, it's time to head back to Cantori. There, we head up to the soldiers who are just guarding the way to the mine, because Duga's ready to, like, officiate on Philip. So he tells them, like, nah, we're going through. This is official business. And they're like, all right, thanks. But they also mention, like, hey, we like you, and so we're going to let you go through. But just so you're aware that Philip is in charge of this whole operation, and that you, as Duga, your whole unit's been disbanded. But if we were on break when you came by, there's nothing we can do about it. And Duga's like, oh, I love it. So we head deep into the mines. There's Philip. Duga taunts him, and he's like, how'd this happen? And Duga's like, what's important is that you die. So we kill him. And Duga knocks his clothes off and sends him away. So I guess we didn't kill him. But anyway, that is the last we hear of Mr. Philip for the rest of the game. So, okay, sure. And then Cyrell is like, oh, I thought you were actually going to kill him. But he's like, nah, this is much better. And you're like, okay, sure, I guess, whatever. It all worked out in the end. So at this point, now that we're in the mine, we beat him up. It's time to rescue all the Cantories. And this is where we meet Yosef, yay, the leader of Cantoria. And he's super grateful. So we escort him and his people back and then head back to the Geofront. And there, Emperor Ragnadam is here. He's just waiting. He's been sitting around waiting for us for the Heritor. And I'm like, bro, Toma's been here this whole time. But he wants to talk. But specifically, he actually does want to meet with Cyrell. So I wonder if you get a different set of situations coming on here if you took out Toma. Maybe he just like rolls up and starts talking to her. Anyway, he speaks to Cyrell as if she knows something, which she obviously does, and then turns to Toma, and they argue about working for the Noswald Empire, because that's what he wants. But Toma's like, no, I'm going to stop everybody, make sure you're all playing nice, like I don't work for anybody. And then he calls him out about Cantore. And it seems like he honestly didn't know any of that stuff was going on, that Philip really was working on his own and that there was nothing he could have done. Well, he's stuff he could have done about it, but he just was unaware. He says, but he's so gobstocked by the whole thing that he's like, I'm going to go investigate this. And he leaves. But before he leaves, he mentions talking to the correct person next time, which is specifically Cyrell. And this whole time we see Ami spying on the conversation. So we go to talk to her, and she says that she wants to talk to us, playing Toma, out on the balcony. So we head there to meet up with Riam Siane. Instead, she uses her like sexiness to try to tempt Toma. She talks about a history between humans and Magus. They've always had skirmishes, but never had a full-out war. And the Maguses have a legend that if there's ever a full-out war with humanity, it will lead to the destruction of the world. And that because of this, she wants the Toma to destroy all the humans. And Toma's like, what the fuck? No. Absolutely not. So she leaves after telling Toma he will never have a chance at this sweet Magus pussy ever again. Back inside, we see that Cyrell has been watching, and she's super mad because part of this whole temptation business that Riam Sian was trying to use was a kiss for Toma. And so she's super mad that Toma was like tempted at all and they didn't reject it. And Toma's like, no, you missed the best part. It's totally when I rejected her. Like Joseph in Egypt. I was like, no, be gone, the evil wench. And then she makes him promise and tell him exactly while looking her in the eyes so that she can believe him. And then he's like, yeah. And then she's like, all right, well, I guess I believe you. And she's like, come on, I made your favorite beef. Or no, she says, come on, Toma, I made your favorite. It's boar stew. And he's like, hooray. And that leads us into chapter 8, which is Cyrell's truth. So at this point, Toma speaks with Xenus about how the country leaders need to just talk it out. But they won't. So we need a stronger geo fortress to force them to get along. Xenus informs us that there is still a power that has been sealed off. And he's about to explain more about this whole situation when an alarm goes off. And it is a blaster attack. Oh no, someone blasted the Geo Fortress, so the full power went to defensive shields, but still, the Geo Fortress got knocked pretty hard. And at that point, we switch over to the desert, and we see Riam Sian and Lerna Zell, her little, I don't know what to call her, like lady-in-waiting, I guess. They dug up some ancient super cannon weapon, and they've been using, that's what they're using. But Riam Sian is like, all right, blast it again. And Lerna Zell's like, no, it's got to charge up. We can't just keep shooting it. And she's like, all right, send the elite forces out. Go capture Toma and then come back while we wait for the energy to load back up. Back at the fortress, Toma wakes up. He got knocked pretty hard. And then he goes and wakes up everybody else, makes sure they're all okay, and that, that the blast didn't kill anybody or hurt anybody too seriously. So we all meet up back at the command center. Xenus tells us that there has been some serious damage, so we need to get the silver medal. And then Cyrell interrupts, saying that, oh, so we got to use the power of the sword. And Xenus is like, that's correct. And then she walks off. And Toma, at that point, is like, huh? What's wrong with her now? Oh, well, let's do something else. And then Xenus is like, and so then he walks up to Xenus, like, all right, Xenus, how do we get the silver medal? And he's like, first thing, go talk to Cyrell. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, so time for Toma to head over that direction. So he follows her over to that side of the fortress where her base of operations is. So that both sides of the fortress have like the big room where you got the Shining Force. There's one on the other side where Cyrell's been holding out, and then she's got a balcony up there too. And then he goes up there, and he's afraid. Oh, let's see. Oh, hold on. Go get. Oh, yeah, Cyrell. Okay. So follow her to that side of the fortress. And she has a much better balcony, too, by the way. And it's overlooking Yale Village. And they start talking about how they first met, fighting evil god, since he's the Heriter, how he feels about all that. He says that he's afraid, but he'll do it because he's a shonen anime protagonist, and he will never give up. Then the crew goes to another section of the fortress, and we use the Shining Force there to open the door, which gets us to the silver medal. And at this point, Cyrell walks up. As Toma's using the Shining Force to open the door, Cyrell walks up, and she has her own Shining Force. And it's like, naughty Deska? That's right. It says Xenos' Shining Force is 2 holy swords, actually. There are 2 heritors. Cyrell is the one. And Zera speaks up because Cyrell is her master, because she was tied to that Shining Force. And then Toma and Xenos are connected through that Shining Force. There's 2 Shining Forces, right? And then Xenos knew the whole time that Cyrell was one of the heritors, but she asked him not to reveal it. And then they talk about how past this point is a guardian that guards the silver medal. And it's this dungeon, and it's the dungeon that I hated the most. If you saw my Shining Force Neo review from a couple weeks ago, I talk about this like super long, it seems like procedurally generated dungeon right at the end of the game. And I hated it. I hated it so much. And I hate it here. I don't hate it as much as I hate the final dungeon of this game, which is the worst dungeon of these 2 games, but there it is. Anyway, and part of what makes it so much better is that Cyrell's got like Inferno, and I think it's just called Ice, but it's like an Ice Shield activation where she can just like cast a spell and run through everybody and kill them. It's kind of like the lightning barrier that the shamans have in World of Warcraft, where it just spins around and does damage to people, only it lasts for a period of time. And then we head all the way to the bottom, we fight the Guardian, get the silver medal, and then head back. And at that point, Xenos takes it to start the activation of the Geo Fortress once again. Cyrell then tells Toma about the 2 swords. She said that there were some individuals who used the Shining Force to make paradise, and others used it for evil. And because of the evil usage of the Shining Force, it corrupted the Shining Force, breaking the 2 swords, and that's also how Mal Shatra was born. Xenos runs up to restart the generator, and the fortress then breaks out of the mountain. It doesn't fly or anything yet, but it's like, blah, and it's like, it breaks a little bit out more of the mountain. And this wraps up Chapter 8, going into Chapter 9, which is called The Ties of Two. At the beginning of this, Xenos informs us that the blaster hit us before we could completely charge up again. So we have to finally have to go deal with it, right? Because it's like causing so many problems. But first, before we go, he wants to fill us in because the silver medal has increased the functions of the fortress. And so at this point, we can now switch the fortress into different modes. So we can have like a super cannon attack, because the cannon attack before couldn't hit the blaster because it was like too far long range. You can only do like medium range, but now it can do super long range. You can do shields. I just left it on cannon. I mean, I didn't really use the fortress stuff that much, to be completely honest. But there it is. Xenos then tells Toma that the 2 masters must work together, and that we need to talk, or that Toma needs to talk to Cyrell so that they can coordinate their goings and comings. So Toma heads over to talk to Cyrell some more because they need to coordinate and talk and whatever. And he calls her out for hiding the sword's location and mentions that maybe she was just being greedy, and that she does agree that, yeah, I did try to take it, but I couldn't take it. So then I was trying to prevent other people from taking it, because once both swords are drawn, Malshatra will resurrect. And that it's, when both swords are drawn, it's supposed to be like a century before the evil demon master or whatever is reborn, but now they're both, so it's not like we're in a hurry or anything, which is kind of silly. And that there does have to be some sort of sacrifice, and so she just wanted to kind of push it off as much as possible. And then Toma promises that no matter what, as long as they are together, they will win. We then head back over to Xenos, who explains to Cyrell the situation with the cannon. We don't get like a full breakdown. It's just like, let me tell you about this. Okay, now we all know. So then we switch over to Cyrell, of course, and then we head south and east to like this beach desert area. We destroy the cannon, and then head out. And then at that point, we switch over to Lurinezel, who's apologizing to the Niamcian, who's like, but you got Toma, right? The elite forces? And then Lurinezel's like, well, about that. And she's like, it doesn't matter, whatever. And then they're back at the they're back at their like castle, and she stares at a door, and she's like, the resurrection is going to happen any day now. Dun dun dun. Back over the Geo Fortress, Toma can't sleep, so he goes to talk to Cyril. And then she leads him out to the balcony. They look at the stars. She asks about his childhood, and he mentions that his people were mountain people and that he was abandoned, and that he was adopted by like the village chief, and that the whole group of them were like barbarians or wanderers, and they just wandered the frontier, and that eventually everyone died but him, just kind of being out and about and doing things with monsters or whatnot. And this is because 5 years ago, all those people got pulled into a battle between Noswald and Fertlant. And he's like, so what about your childhood? And she mentions that she was raised by her grandfather in the capital Grantal, which is the capital of Noswald, and that he was the historian for the imperial capital or whatever, and that she would follow him every day to bug him, but then she started reading and became really into it. And that before he died, her grandpa told her to go out and experience the world and get out of the library and stuff. But he did say that history is a compass to guide to the future, which wraps up Chapter 9. Going into Chapter 10, called The Voice from the Past. We're back over on the airship with Kathiana, the princess and the sister of Ragnadon. She's asking her brother, what's up? He's like, oh, I'm thinking about the Shonen Force and all this stuff. And she's like, I'm glad. Because his whole thing was like, I should have been the one to get the Shining Force, and I should be the one who has to sacrifice himself for like the good of the world and save the Empire and blah blah blah. And she's like, well, I'm glad you don't have to do that. You can avoid the fate and whatnot. And he's like, no. And then he's like, they talk about him being brave and stuff. And he's like, that girl, like I need to talk to that girl. There's more to meet the eye there. So then we head back. He's talking about Cyril, of course. So we head back over to the Geo Fortress. Zenos mentions getting a mysterious signal from somewhere. Maybe it's coming from some system that was built at the same time as the Geo Fortress. And we're like, oh, a strange signal, huh? What's the problem with that? And it's like, well, if there's another powerful base out there, we need to kind of figure it out. But we get interrupted at that point because Falkland, one of the Magus kids, comes rushing in. And then he takes us to the engineering block where all the robots that are supposed to be like doing stuff, they're just like talking about removing a signal or contacting a signal or whatnot. Meeting back up with Zenos, he mentions that this signal they found must be a distress signal of some sort from like a command robot, and so this is definitely going to cause problems and make it harder for us to proceed forward. So of course we have to go take care of the signal, and that it's coming from beyond the mines. So we head there, we fight our way through. At some point someone mentions that there must be a robot that was made to help the Heritors, and it's activating because of everything that's going on. We fight through some ice fields, which are past the mine, into the ancient ruins. And we get here, and it's this like super futuristic place. So obviously it's somewhat tied into the same, like it is kind of like another base, or it was some sort of ship or something. And we start running into a lot of bugs here. Like the bugs are kind of like the big Legion monster thingies, the Malaxitras people or whatever. At the bottom we find Adam. Hey, it's Adam again. It's a different Adam. There's like Adams in so many of these games. It's like the one thing that is the thoroughfare between all the Shining games. So there's Adam keeps popping up. So that's fun. He asks if Cyril has the Shining Force and states that she cannot be the Heritor because he knows the Heritor and it's not you and something. And she's like, well, of course I am. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Grant. Grant was the guy that we learned about who fought Malaxtra like 3,000 years ago. And it's like, holy cow, were you working with him like 3,000 years ago? And it's like, yes, he was the first warrior defeated Malaxtra. And then we find out that, and this is wrong, but I'm playing this game, and he says, yes, this is the remains of Malaxtra's dying ship, which is the Gust. But we shortly find out that or the Gusk. And then we actually go fight on the Gusk, like at a later point, and it's a totally different ship, not this ship at all. And so that was pretty confusing, to be completely honest. He also talks about how he stayed on this ship after the thing crashed or whatever and kept fighting the enemies of light or whatever until his energy finally ran out and he had to take a little napopotamus here, and that he says he killed about 13,000 foes, which is fucking super nice. Excellent. We take him back to meet up with Toma at the Geo Fortress. He then fixes all the robots and tells them all to go back to work, and then he's like, hey, I'm going to join you guys and fight. And it's like, hooray, now we got a robot friend. Cyril then heads to her room where Ragnadan is chilling. He came through the balcony via the airship because apparently we have no defenses for that situation. But he really wants to talk to Cyril because Toma's too immature to understand, and Cyril's part of like the human empire and such and such. And then he mentions that they start talking about the fate of the Heritor, and he says that he can help because the fate is dun 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 that they will die. That's the sacrifice, right? It was pretty obvious, but now it is confirmed. But why? Ragnadan asks. Cyril agrees that the Shonen force is not strong enough to stop Malkshatra, and that the sacrifice gives it the extra power, I guess, to like have the energy to like defeat Malakshtra or Malshatra. And then Ragnadan. And then she mentions there's plenty of time, but then he's like, au contraire, the whole reason I started this like bloody war, this all-out war with the Magus is because is to make it go faster. So, and he talks about how the whole purpose of the Noswald Empire is to destroy Malkshatra, and that it was originally started by Grant all the way back in the day as this whole thing. At this point, then Cyril gets her little flirt on with this guy. Well, again, he flirts with her, gives her a jewel so she can use it to get into the castle of Noswald. And then pieces out. And then Zara's like, hey, you should really talk to Toma about all this. But she's like, I don't want to. But she has no choice, because as she leaves the balcony, Toma's like, hey, what was that all about? And it's like, God, you guys got to stop spying on each other. And also just tell each other you like each other. This is getting ridiculous. Anyway, he gets real mad about her lying, obviously. And then he runs off. And then Zara's like, you got to be honest. I told you. And Zara's like, no, it's better not to be honest. I'd rather him hate me. And then she goes to her room, and we can see Ami then giggling to herself while watching this whole situation unfold. And this conversation leads us into Chapter 11, Separation. So at this point, Ami walks over to talk to Toma, and they're over on his balcony, and she points out at something. She's like, hey, what's that over there? You should look at that. And then Toma goes to look out. She knocks him out. Later on, the team is super confused because no one's seen Toma. Where's Toma? And then Falkland speaks up and reveals that Ami knocked him out and put him on a blue bird to take off. And Ami's like, no, I didn't. She's like, no way I did that. Why would I do that? And then Cyril reveals that the Master Magus has the ability to control any Magus from any distance far away. And that's part of their like whole shebang. And it's like, ruh-roh, that's exactly what happened. So then Cyril's like, I gotta go rescue Toma no matter what. And then Ami's like, I'm coming too, because I don't like being used and stuff. And I'm going to show you guys that I really didn't do anything. And then they talk about how Toma most likely was taken to the Magma prison, which is the prison of the Maguses. And then Falkland asks what about the border guard? And Ami's like, it's fine. They're a bunch of friends of mine. I'll get through them pretty easily, which she does. So we head over there, kill our way there. And then we get to the border gate. And Ami's like, let us through. And he's like, no. And then she's like, oh, yeah, the Magus code. And he's like, oh, the Magus code, huh? And then he's like, all right, fine, that's fine. And it's like, what's the Magus code? And she's like, oh, last time he disagreed with something, I beat him up, and I'll do it again. Oh, goodness. Cyril wonders if Toma's okay, and then we switch over to him, and he wakes up in the prison. Riam Sian rolls up, and she taunts him about Cyril being with Ragnadan, and he gets mad and slaps back. Then Riam Sian mentions the comment Cyril made earlier about rather dying than telling Toma the truth. We then switch back over to Cyril and Ami and our third person. And then we get to the prison, we start busting it up, then we switch back over to Toma. He's going back and forth with Ramsian about trusting Cyril. Toma is pushing some real like shonen anime pro tag vibes, which is excellent. And so she decides to go in for the kiss here, and he's like super confused, and something happens. What happens? We'll find out soon, because it switches back over to Cyril, and eventually we get to Riam-sian, and Cyril demands Toma back. She's like, give him back. He's mine. He's my boyfriend, not your boyfriend. And then Riam-sian's like, no, I need him to open the Nether Gate. And so we have to fight her, and we beat her up. She's pretty tough, but we beat her and Lorenziel up, and then they retreat. And then we find Toma, and he's just standing silently, and he's just saying that he will follow Lady Riam-sian no matter what. And Cyril holds Toma and cries. So, of course, that cures Toma, because this is a shonen anime. She asks what he remembers, and he's like, I remember getting kissed. And then she slaps him, and he's like, Baka. Oh, it's so good. Cliches are cliches for a reason, everybody. That's all I gotta say. It cracked me up. Toma's like, what? You need to hear what happened. No, stop. Jack's like, I don't care. And it's like, of course she cares. He finally apologizes. He's like, I don't apologize for the kiss because I didn't do it. She kissed me. Like, I sexually assaulted girl. But for not believing and trusting her this whole time. And he says that he trusts her no matter what. And then she finally thanks him for that. And that wraps up Chapter 11. And then Chapter 12, The Emperor's Ambition. We see this huge army moving forward from Noswald over to Ferntland. Lernaziel is reporting to Riam-sian that the humans have begun their invasion. She curses Ragnadan, or Riam-sian curses Ragnadan, and decides that their army needs to be activated, despite the taboo. She has no other choice. She must protect her people. So over the Geofortress, Xenos is reporting into Toma and Cyril that the war has like kicked it up a notch, and that they're finally going to all-out war. Toma is pissed. Cyril states that it is not their only problem, that their biggest problem is Malkshatra. And the reason total war is such a bad idea between these two nations, and the reason why that they're going to total war, like the curse is going to occur, is because Mal Shatra grows on when the darkness in people's hearts grows. So having this war increases that. So it's exactly like the Beast King from Shining Tears, actually, which is a totally different company that made that game. But it's interesting. It's like the fear and the anger and all that stuff. They probably got something from Sega being like, this is what you're going to go with. And so Cyril's like, hey, let's go talk to Ragnadan, see if we can get him to stop. And then that jewel he gave him earlier to get inside, she throws it on the ground. It's like, all right, we can use this, whoever goes. And it's like, Cyril, it's going to be you. Pick up the fucking jewel, you crazy bitch. So then we head over to Noswald. We get to this giant bridge with the fortress on their side. We head in. We show the jewel to the guards. And they're like, yeah, go ahead. Go nuts. Oh, by the way, also the war beasts that they've been producing like crazy, they've gone berserk. So good luck. Try not to die. And so then we head further in. We have to fight through some of these like electrical rooms, which are kind of annoying. And we have to but it's fun because we get to destroy like pieces of the room. Like there's like you could always destroy like boxes to find stuff, and now there's like control panels and stuff. So that's cool. We finally reach Ragnadan in his palace, and we speak with his sister. Oh, we speak with his sister right before we go into like the throne room and some of the guards. He's excited to see Cyril until she says, I'm not here to help you. I'm here to stop you from fighting. And he's like, whatever, I'll just fight you and then I'll take what I want. And then he was super hard because at this point I had sold like my fire book and I only had my ice magic book, and he's immune to ice magic apparently. So I just ran around in circles while my companions beat the shit out of him. Afterwards, he's super pissed off that he lost. But he does admit that he does want to resurrect Mal Shatra and then cleanse the shining force of the taint. And he believes the taint comes from the Magus. Of course, that's why he's involved in this whole thing, because they're obviously the evil, because they're different. Lessons learned. He claims that the Magus are protecting the rest of the place of Mal Shatra, and that makes him complicit in the whole situation. And then Cyril slaps back about that the resurrection will cause all sorts of death and troubles. And he's like, it doesn't matter. As long as we can cleanse the world of the Magus and his evil for good, it'll be worth it in the end. That wraps up Chapter 12 and leads us into Chapter 13, Countdown. So over in Furtland, Riemsian is concerned and states to herself that, oh, it looks like this might be over. And then someone shouts about the gate opening. And then we find out that they just hear like, oh, help, the gate's opening. And then we flip over and it's Lorenziel. So I don't know why they kept it like a secret for a minute there, but that's what they did. So she stands before the nether gate. Riemsian teleports over and they're like, why is it opening? It shouldn't be opening now. And then dun dun dun, is it the ship awakening? Oh, what ship? Back to the Geo Fortress, Xenos is talking to the team. He says, well, the last known point of Mal Shatra was the ship Gusk, which is right near the Crimson Palace. And then, again, this is where I was like, wait, wasn't Adam in Gusk? I guess not. Maybe I just misread something. Anyway, Cyril wonders if Ragnadan was speaking the truth. And then Amy and Falkland speak up. And they say the Magus are just as scared of Mal Shatra as anybody else, and that they have nothing to do with trying to protect him, that the gate might just be there because it's there, and they're guarding over it because they don't want anyone to open it. Xenos just turns the talk over to cleansing the Shining Force, and he says that the scriptures say they must be cleansed to destroy Mal Shatra instead of just putting him back to sleep and someone being sacrificed. But there's no firm directions on how to do this or what needs to be done, and we never get those directions. We just kind of stumble into it because it's a shonen anime. Then the fortress gives out a warning. Gusk is activating. Gusk is activating. And so we must get to the Crimson Palace and see what is happening. So we run through this palace, which is really fucking long. It's a huge... These dungeons start getting, like, real tedious at this point. Like, we're, like, 2 chapters away from the end of the game, I think. So we go. We finally get to Riemsian. She's past her throne room after we fight, like, a boss there, and she's fighting the Hive. Oh, no, the Hive. And then Lorenziel is... And the funny thing about the Hive, too, is it's, like, when you get to the end of the game in Shining Tears, there's also, like, bug-based creatures who are, like, members of this, like, Hive faction or whatever. She needs help. She's getting beat like real bad. And then Lorenziel is crashed out on the floor. And then they're like, oh, the creatures are never ending leaving this gate. So we save them, beat all them up. And then she's like, oh, thank you so much. And at that point, Ragnadan's army rolls up because we cleared out the whole fucking palace and everything on the way. So his army's just like, do. Literally, he's just like, how did you get here so fast? And he's like, well, we just followed the people who were clearing it out. And I was like, oh. Say nothing to impede him. He makes the claim to Riemsian that Magus are corrupted and that they corrupted the Shining Force and that they worship Mal Shatra. And she's like, Baka, you're an idiot. And he's like, oh, am I an idiot? And she's like, he goes with it like immediately. I love it. And she's like, the reason the Nether Gate is here is because the ancestors of the Magus sealed it, you dipshit. And Mal Shatra and Gusk are behind the gate. And he's like, oh, well, I apologize. I misjudged this entire situation. Like, literally. It's so ridiculous. It's so good. because he was so zealous before. Like, I will never not fight them. They are the reason for the corruption. And then she's like, we didn't do it. We're good guys. And he's like, oh, really? My bad. I'm sorry, everyone. That's when it started this total war. Oh my goodness. And then Ramsay's like, well, it's not your fault. I mean, he gets mad at himself, and he's like, oh, I've led the world to destruction for no reason. And she's like, oh, it's my fault too. I broke the taboo. I could have I guess we could have talked it out. It's like, it's everyone's fault. And I'm like, this is hilarious. And they're like, all right, let's team up and let's go. And they're going to go inside and hold the back until we can figure out shit out with the Shining Force and cleanse it and actually go show up and fight Mal Saktra and kill him. And then they go in and slam the door shut. And they order everyone else to evacuate outside the Crimson Palace. And they go in to sacrifice themselves. And that takes us to the penultimate chapter, which is chapter 14, Sword of Destiny. So we start off with a cutscene of the Gusk rising into the sky, and it's very dark and forbidding, and there's lightning and rain, and there's a lava river. It's all very dramatic. We see Borne. He's getting more gear for us to buy in town, and then he hears a noise, and he sees a bunch of these hive creatures running around. And then we head back up to the fortress where Cyril and Tomar are chatting about the ship. And then Gilne, who's Borne's son, Borne is like he's kind of like our, I know I keep saying, he's like our Deckard Cain, because he identifies all our stuff for us, but he also sells us new stuff. And we can buy stuff from him, or we can sell our stuff and buy stuff from him as well. And then Borne's like, come check out my dad. He's all messed up and freaking out and stuff. And we go talk to him. He's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just really mad I lost my strong box. And it was like, man, I'm all over the place with this. And then Cyril's like, where were you? And he's like, Lacton Village. And she's like, oh, no, I'm very concerned. We should go check it out. And so Zenos mentions that the warp gate that leads to Lacton Village has been damaged, so we'll have to go by foot, which is pretty fun. It's pretty easy. We just teleport to the closest area and just meander ourselves over there. And once we get there, we find a smith. Oh, there's a smith. I've been waiting for this guy the whole fucking game. Don't worry, the smithing is really not that important. I maxed out all my smithing stuff, and I really didn't feel that much more powerful, so I don't feel too bad about the whole situation, to be completely honest. But I have been hampering myself, which is sad. So back at the Geo Fortress, we clear out Lacton, we talk to that guy, we save all the people there, we bring him back to the Geo Fortress so we can smith our stuff. And then once we get there, Zenos talks about Malaxtra, or Malshatras, that the word has spread very fast and people are really freaking out, and likely because there's a giant, ominous, dark, scary thing in the sky floating around. And then we find out that Zenos and Zero were created after the Gusk was defeated by Grant to help with the Geo Fortress and the Two Shining Force and all this stuff. We talk about the warp gate, that there's literally just a warp gate that leads to Mal Shatra, but that both heritors have to be there for it to open, but only one can go through. And then we learn that that without cleansing the Shining Force, there's a way for one of the heritors to use both the swords. At that point, Cyril takes over from their explanation, and she says if a heritor dies, then their sword goes back to the dais, and once that person dies, if a heritor dies, the sword will go back to the dais, waiting for the next person to pick it up, unless they get killed by the other heritor. So Toma or Cyril have to kill each other to get the sword, which is not true at all, and we find that out very quickly. And then, but that's the curse, right? And so we have to go to the depths of the fortress, and then each character has to fight their own ordeal. So at this point, you choose who you want to go with, essentially. So there's two endings. I did the Cyril ending, but my understanding is the Toma and Cyril ending are almost virtually identical. It's just you get 2 point of views, essentially, from the same story. I wasn't going to go back and play through it, because it's you have to play the last 2 chapters. And this dungeon at the end of the game is so fucking awful. I was getting one-shotted all the time. I hated it. Anyway, so we have to go to Cyril by herself with no companions into the Trial of Ordeals. So we do that, and then go through that. Okay, then once we get through that, Toma's also through his, and it's time to fight. So at that point, we win as Cyril. So she's about to sacrifice herself to... and she's offers to sacrifice herself to complete the sword. But then he knocks her down and knocks her out, but doesn't quite kill her, right? So I guess we don't need to kill her. And then grabs the sword or something. He doesn't grab the sword. He just knocks her out and then walks off. He does tell her that he loves her before entering the portal, but he doesn't have both swords, right? So the whole thing is very confusing. And then inside, we find Ramsian and Ragnadan, and they're flirting with each other, which is, of course they are. Toma then runs up through... he runs up and he's like, hey! And then... Okay, yeah. So then they join forces as the 2 companions. We fight through this area. This part's actually not so bad. And then we find another person that is possessed with a sword. And then Ramsian mentions that this person is possessed by Malshatra. And then we beat the shit out of him. And then the true shadow Malshatra shows up. and just beats the shit out of all of us, which wraps up chapter 14. We then head into chapter 15, the final chapter, opening the future. So back at the Geo Fortress, Xenos and Zero speak with Cyrell. They state that Toma is likely dead. He's likely defeated, and Cyrell tells them to stop talking. We check in with all the others. Apparently it's been 3 days since Toma disappeared. And finally we head over to Toma's room. And there's the Shining Force. Oh no! And she's like crying and sad because she loves Toma too. And she touches the sword and she gets some of Toma's memories from like just the game. She then says she loves him as well, like out loud. Then Geo Fortress turns into light and transforms into a flying fortress. Zero questions Xenos on what is happening. And he's like, the seal has been broken. The Shining Force is cleansed. And the Cyrell rushes back in. Apparently their love... or like Toma's showing mercy, and then Cyrell admitting her love allowed Cyrell to pull both swords. So now she has the Shining Force or whatever, and I'm assuming the same thing happens in reverse with Toma if you chose him. So now it's time to move on the Gusk and rescue Toma. So this time we can actually take people out with us. And this is where we get to that dungeon that I mentioned. I hate. It's so fucking long, and it's boring, and it's hard as fuck. Like, I literally just be like, fight, and then I'd be dead. And I was like, I'd full life. Like, what the fuck happened? Eventually, we just push, kill. We get to the heart of the palace. Once we're at there, we see Riemsian, Ragnadon, and Toma. Oh no! Or first we ask about Toma, and Riemsian attacks. Then Toma shows up, and he's possessed. They're all possessed. So then Cyrell's like, I swear to bring you back no matter what, so we can do this together. And so then we beat up on them. Once we beat Riemsian, which is this boss battle, in fact, the last two boss battles, like the last boss battle has like a trick, but once you figure out that trick, like there's like one attack he does, like one shots the shit out of you. But if you just avoid that attack, which once I figured out how to avoid it, it's super easy to avoid. These last two, like this, getting to this point was 1,000 times harder, like 1,000 times, like exponentially harder than actually fighting the last boss. So we literally kicked the shit out of Riemsian, and then she like wakes up and is like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm gonna help you guys. And we beat the shit out of Ragnadan, and we're fighting all three of them at the same time. And then he wakes up. And then finally we beat Malik Shatra right out of Toma. And then everyone's like, well, you're on your own now. You have 4 of us here. You have like the 2 people you brought, which I think I had Gadfort and Adam at that point, because Adam could they would like heal but also do like AoE attacks essentially. Anyway. So, yeah, and in this last dungeon, the whole game, I'm just running around casting spells, and in this last dungeon, guys have, like, extremely high resistances, so now I have to, like, I had to switch over. Like, I did not use, like, a bow and arrow this entire game until I got to, like, this end, and then it was, like, way more efficient. Like, I was doing so much more damage using the bow and arrow, and before it was, like, the spells were just massacring everybody. So, again, it's, like, last dungeon was just, like, to me, it's, like, a poorly designed situation, because it's, like, if I can play everything up to this game playing in one style, and now I have to completely switch the style of play, like, you did something wrong. Like that's not a me problem. That's a game developer problem. Anyway. Okay. So now yeah, I'm trying to use magic. So at this point I'm switching back and forth, right? But I'm trying to use magic, and I do like no damage to Malik Shatra, and then he does this like thing where he transforms into like a shadow thing and launches himself at a wall. And you essentially like as soon as you see him start transforming, you have to like start circling. Because at some point he's going to target where you're at, and he's going to go right to that spot. So if you're not constantly moving at that point, then he's going to he does like thousands and thousands of damage. But like everything else he does like very little damage in comparison. So as long as you have enough healing items, you can just like go and plunk. But I still, once I got the hang of that, I was doing so little damage with the spells that I was like, fuck it. And this guy's weak against light, so I just went and like, I kept going back to Borny until he had like a light weapon, and then I just got that and you like a light bow and arrow essentially, and just leveled that up all the way. So if you're playing Toma, this is probably like a lot easier. I mean, granted, you still have to run up to him, and then when he does his like black transformation or his shadow transformation that like fucks you over, that could be pretty tough. Because with the bow, I was just like ding, and the second he did that, I just started running. So I never even got that close to him. Or like occasionally I would, but with the book, it's like I was trying to punch him with that fucking book, and it was like impossible. Anyway, it took me a few tries. Like I got one shot at the first time. All right, so after we win, at that point, Cyrell goes to help Toma up, and Toma's like knocked out still, and she begs, oh, Toma, and she's like crying, and then he does, and they hug, and she confesses her love to him again, and she's like, I want to stay with you forever, and he's kind of confused because he's a dumb fucking Shonen anime pro tag, but then he admits, oh, I love you too, and then that's the credits, and that's into the game. Like, there's no other wrap-up. Like, during the end credit scenes, we see some wrap-up. We see, like, Ragnadan and Riemsian, like, just hanging out with, like, Lorenzel and, like, Kathina, the princess. And then we see some other people just kind of, like, doing random stuff. But, like, that's it. The game just, like, it's like, oh, you woke up and now we're going to be together forever at the end. And it's like, that was odd. Like, usually these games have, like, a little bit more kind of, like, and then we did this, or we went on adventures together. Like, we walked off into the sunset. It's like, I don't know. It felt like abrupt. Like none of these Shining. That's the thing. There hasn't been a single one of these Shining games that I can think of off the top of my head, except for Shining Wisdom, maybe, that had an ending. Oh no, Shining Soul 2 had a pretty in-depth, like, oh, you're my son now, and you and the princess will get married eventually, and we'll all be friends, and you're gonna be like leader of my guy. It had like an actual like, oh, we're gonna wrap things up. But all these Shining games, even the Camelot games, they would just like end. It'd be like, oh, what happened to Adam? Oh, Adam, or what happened to Max? Max and Adam just disappeared because of the thing. That had more of a wrap up than this. This had like, it just ended. I don't know. It was so funny. It was like, there it is. Credits roll. I was like, huh. So that's Shining Force EXA for PlayStation 2. It's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, especially cheating. I enjoyed myself. The story was very cute. It was very shonen anime. Cyril's a babe, and Tomo was a fun character. That's the thing. Like the characters are generally good. The side characters, unlike in Shining Force Neo, were not really presented at all. They were like around, but like they did virtually nothing and had like little to say about anything. Like they barely spoke. Even when they were in your party, they were like barely around. So it was really the Toma and Cyril show. But Toma and Cyril are both lovable goofuses, and so I enjoyed it. And besides that ending dungeon, which was super frustrating, the rest of the game was just kind of like smooth, fun times. So yeah, there you go. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys later.